In the following presentation, we would like to give you a very brief and simplistic introduction to the mental health and psychosocial policy, resolution and roadmap working groups. As for you to understand the connection with today's webinar and the MHPSS roadmap within the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. Every day, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement around the world is confronted with the extensive unmet mental health and psychosocial needs. The movement saw an urgent need to increase efforts to address these needs, and therefore, in December 2019, the movement made historical commitments and adopted a joint movement policy on mental health and psychosocial needs in all contexts. Also, together with 196 states, the state parties to the Geneva Conventions, the RCRC movement recognized the urgent need to scale up the collective response to the MHPSS needs of people affected by armed conflicts, natural disasters, and other emergencies. Turning our attention back to the MHPSS policy, its aim was also to contribute to an enhanced RCRC movement response by providing overall guidance to national societies, the IFRC and the ICRC on how to build a more harmonized, integrated, contextually appropriate and holistic response to MHPSS. With the policy, a roadmap document followed, highlighting 6 priority action areas on addressing mental health and psychosocial needs. The roadmap sets out a strategic and coordinated approach in terms of the activities to be carried out individually by national societies, the IFRC and the ICRC, and activities to be carried out together. The ICRC and the IFRC and a group of national societies have supported and coordinated the rollout of the roadmap since 2020 by, for example, creating 5 working groups. These groups were officially formed based on the priority action area thematics. Working Group 1. Achieve a basic level of MHPSS across sectors. Working Group 2. Reinforce the movement's MHPSS collaboration. Working Group 3. Promote the MHPSS well-being of staff and volunteers. Working Group 4. Demonstrate the impact of MHPSS interventions. Working Group 5. Strengthen the advocacy for mental health and resource mobilization. For this webinar series, a number of national societies engaged in Working Group 4 have come together to showcase good practices from national societies and to highlight various aspects of monitoring and evaluation and research. The working groups are a unique space for various RCRC movement actors to exchange experiences and work jointly toward the implementation of the MHPSS commitments. The working groups continue to rely on the participation of national societies. For these groups to remain relevant, it is necessary that the participants from national societies represent all regions and all levels of MHPSS experience. Come and join the working group efforts to ensure your region's voice and experiences are being heard and represented in 2023 and beyond. Thank you for listening and enjoy the remaining of the webinar.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Natalie and Veronica.
شكرا نتنيا، شكرا جزيلا الذين خاصة الذين قاموا بتشكيل هذا الفيديو. هو الهدف من مجموعة العمل هو تعزيز الأدلة للعاملين في مجال MHPSS.
Efficiency, but also the effectiveness of MHPSS, and therefore also allows us to reach more people, more vulnerable people with appropriate mental health and psychosocial support. Now I would like to hand over to our host of this webinar, Rebecca Horn. Rebecca is a psychologist by training, and since 2003, has worked as a community-based psychosocial specialist in humanitarian settings across the world, primarily with people affected by conflict and displacement. Her work has included research assessments and evaluations, capacity strengthening initiatives such as trainings also and mentoring. And she's been working directly with organizations to integrate psychosocial approaches into their programs in various sectors. She's currently working as a part-time psychosocial practitioner for the British Red Cross and for the ISAC MHPSS Monitoring and Evaluation Global Help Desk. She's also Senior Research Fellow with the Institute of Global Health and Development at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh, UK. Wow, what a stunning profile. Thank you for leading us through this series of webinars. I hand over to you, Rebecca, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Yours.
Monia. Thanks for the nice introduction. And welcome to everybody. You're very welcome to this first in a series of 4 webinars. I was really happy to be invited to take part in it. And I'm looking forward so much to being with you today and in the coming 3 webinars over the next few months. So just to give you a short orientation to what we'll be doing together in this first webinar. It's 90 minutes, as you know. We have 2 presentations. We're focusing today on cultural adaptation of tools. So interesting. I've done some work on this myself in various settings, and we know how important it is to have ways of measuring well-being which are appropriate to the context in which they're being used. So we're going to hear 2 examples today, 2 different case studies from 2 different national societies. We'll move on to the first one after my brief introduction. After each one, we'll have a very short period of question and answer, and that will be just for clarification in relation to the presentation you've just heard. But after the second presentation, we'll have more time for a panel discussion. So we would really welcome your questions. And the way to do that is to use the chat function. We have translation today into Arabic. I don't know whether somebody else might explain how to connect to that translation function if people want to use it. Should we do that now?
Yes, we can do that now.
Thanks.
When you go down to the panel where you are pressing the mute button or start video and so on, there's also a little globe. And if you click on that, you can change it to Arabic or back to English if you prefer. So I hope that should be possible for everyone. Now I'm saying this message in English, obviously, so, but I hope that, that if not, then people should write in the chat, and then Abu Bakr, who's assisting us with interpretation, and Mohammed will help us explain that.
So thank you very much. So because we have 2 different channels and 2 different languages, the way we'll ask you to communicate with us, if you have a technical issue or if you have a question or a comment on the presentations you'll hear, is not by opening your mic, but through the chat function. I hope you all know how to open the chat. If there are 3 small dots at the bottom of your screen, if you click on that, you can, I see lots of you have already shared your information in the chat, but open that chat box and you can share any questions, comments, technical issues in there. And they will be given to us, given to the presenters and to me by our colleagues at the IFRC Psychosocial Centre. So we hope this system works. If you type your question in Arabic, then the translators can help to translate those for our colleagues at the Psychosocial Centre. I hope that's clear. Basically, use the chat function, please do. Any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to say, and we'll have a chance for discussion after the second presentation primarily. Although any clarification questions, please go ahead. I think that is everything I need to say. Is there something I've missed, IFRC Psychosocial Centre or Monia, and in terms of technical things?
No, all good.
Fantastic, great. Well, in that case, do we have any questions, in fact, relating to the roadmap or what's been said so far?
No questions, no.
No questions. In that case, I think we can move straight on to our first case study presentation. So this is coming from our 2 colleagues in Turkey. We have with us Mehlika Talyoglu, who graduated from the Middle East Technical University in Turkey, the Department of Psychology. And after graduation, she held several different positions in the field of humanitarian aid within MHPSS and protection units. And currently, Melika is working on her master's degree in social sciences at the University of Ankara in the Department of Disaster and Humanitarian Aid Management. Her thesis, which sounds very interesting, is on the subject of individual resilience, psychosocial resilience, and community resilience. And she's currently working as protection officer at YSYD. And she's joined by her colleague, Berna Yuksek, who obtained her BA in psychology from the Eastern Mediterranean University and an MA in clinical psychology from Hasan Kalyoncu University. And Berna has been working in the humanitarian field and refugee context for 4 years. She's currently working as an MHPSS officer in YSYD. So with that, I will hand over to you, Melika, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Rebecca. So hello, everyone. I hope you enjoy this webinar, and I hope you can find answers about cultural adaptations in your mind. So actually, we will start. We will answer some questions regarding to the topic. So Veronica, could you please start my presentation? Veronica. Okay. Thank you.
I will make it on the big screen.
So I want to start with the quote, actually. Necessity is the mother of invention, obviously. Humanitarian assistance, including MHPSS activities, aim to reduce the negative impact of exposure of adversity of pre- and post-migration. So cross-cultural differences can create and increase social vulnerability. We are aware of that according to the research and also according to our field experience. Culture is one of the determinants of vulnerability and resilience, also an important factor in disaster risk reduction. So today we will look at this issue from two different windows. Firstly, we will present cultural adaptation practices we have done in Turkey for refugees from Afghanistan briefly. After that, cultural adaptation practices from South Africa Red Cross will be shared. So we can start. Turkey is the host to the world's largest refugee population since 2014. There are 3.6 million Syrians and also 330,000 refugees under international protection. So Afghan nationals have been the leading international protection applicants in Turkey since 2019. This means that humanitarian organizations, especially operating in Turkey, have to be aware of different traditions, customs of behavior, and must incorporate those characteristics into their humanitarian projects. The importance of cultural adaptation has been demonstrated by a number of meta-analyses, which found that culturally adapted interventions are associated with greater effectiveness. So we have adapted all of our work on the field culturally. This reason. Next, you can go to the next, Veronica. YSYD, previously known as MSYD in Turkey, is working with refugees from different backgrounds since 2015. According to our experience in the field, there is a need for adaptations on each service that will be provided within the project for efficiency and efficacy. Therefore, necessary adaptations have done according to the need of target populations on the beginning of each project implementation cycle. We have experience with Syrians and Iraqis mostly until 2020. Iranian and Afghan beneficiaries have been welcomed within projects as well. However, we started to implement a project which targets Afghan refugees as beneficiaries on 2020. At the beginning of the project, we have done some research on cultural background and to adapt the project activities culturally. We embraced mostly ecological validity model with Bernal's framework, actually, and studied on below questions and beyond with translators and cultural mediators from Afghanistan. To ensure mutual understanding, interventions, especially on protection and MHPSS content and tools, were designed accordingly. Cultural adaptation of psychological interventions is reviewed as the modification of an intervention protocol and tools consider language, culture, and context in such a way that is compatible with clients' cultural patterns, meanings, and values. So you can see on the slide that we have, like I said, we have embraced ecological validity model, and these are dimensions of the model, actually. Could we please, the next slide? Okay, so what are the what could have been happened if we didn't adapt the tools and services culturally? If there were no cultural adaptation strategies, actually, the efficiency and efficacy of the implemented programs would have been decreased. Cross-cultural differences may make it difficult to establish a bond of trust, since it's really beneficial and vital in our field, and therapeutic relationship between the beneficiary and the service provider. So planning the intervention according to beneficiaries' needs become harder on this way. One size fits all perspective doesn't serve usually on humanitarian field, except for the minimum standards. Obviously, we have embraced minimum standards too, but we have adapted tools and interventions according to the culture. So could we please go to the next slide? What are the culturally based coping strategies? Actually, while we are researching about these questions, it was really fruitful for us because we have thought that Syria and Afghanistan may have similar backgrounds, but actually they have special differences within the culture. So in more affected areas, resilience is a critical issue, of course, and intuitively useful constructs to explain why, despite significant exposure to war, individuals and families achieve emotional adjustment and social functioning. Namely, good adaptation or in a context of risk. So we can observe that, but in which level? Because it's unique and it's subjective. The need to document of how people make sense of and cope with life events is particularly acute in conflict zones, where much of the mental health literature has focused on risk rather than resilience and overlooked how specific cultural and ecological contexts frame individual and collective experiences of political violence. Most Afghans interviewed within the sessions actually reported that conflict and violence as the main reasons for leaving their country. The high prevalence of mental health issues among refugees is observed. In addition, post-migration stressors like lack of social support, isolation, insecurity regarding migration status in Turkey, reduced housing and employment opportunities, and financial difficulties may be more detrimental to mental health than pre-migration stressors and trauma. High levels of PTSD, anxiety, depression, and emotional and behavioral problems are the most observed mental health issues. This Afghan population can be defined as collectivist in a way. People generally put their family's interests before their own. This means that family responsibilities tend to hold a greater importance than personal needs. Loyalty to one's family also generally supersedes any obligations to one's tribe or ethnicity. Throughout all of Afghanistan, family matters are kept strictly private usually. People are often reluctant to share personal issues with non-family members, as community knowledge of a family's struggles can bring shame on the household. So this situation induces a double bind. and makes it harder to intervene on MH issues. Firstly, they benefit from the family as a coping strategy. And secondly, the family may have overwhelming impact on adversities and may elicit entrapment, unfortunately. As a result, they may struggle to share adversities with the psychologist, like I said. For this reason, metaphors were developed and being used both for individual sessions and also psychosocial support activities. Social support is used as coping mechanism more by females. On the other hand, males mostly lie back to himself or God mostly. Religiosity is also a way of coping, obviously. They use words like wahdat or ittifak in Dari, Farsi, for family unity, and they think it's a substantial element of life. Also, beneficiaries referred to koshish mechanism when asked to describe how they might overcome particular stressors. And this means that I will try harder. So when we give the psychoeducation or provide the psychoeducation or some tips about coping, they mostly use koshish mechanism, this word. Resilience and fortitude rest upon a sense of hope, the belief that adversity can ultimately be overcome in a process of meaning making that gives coherence to past, present, and future experiences. In Afghanistan, the bedrock of this hope is the production and maintenance of a set of long-lived cultural values. Strong religious faith, iman, they say, and individual effort, like koshish, are values that structure a discourse of resilience in the face of adversity, often through acceptance, the will of God, and a hope that everyday perseverance will be rewarded with His mercy and protection. So could we please go on to next? What are the responses within the context of culture to the mental health issues? Like I said, as we can understood from the earlier question, Afghan population has a high level of stigma, like all of the Middle East, MENA region actually have, toward mental health issues. Even though the MH promotion materials culturally adopted, they are cautious to apply for the MHPSS services. On the other hand, they apply to the notables of their community and religious groups, firstly about mental health issues. Also, before applying for the MH service, after we provided MH promotion, they ask its appropriateness to family elders or notables again. Also, many beneficiaries expressed concerns that they might go crazy or they would go insane, and that the occurrence of symptoms was a consequence of personal sin. Also, families are more likely to internalize their emotions. It's not a surprise. As a result, somatic complaints, anxiety, and depression symptoms mostly occur. Some examples from somatic expressions of psychological distress are constriction of chest, fulfillment of throat, conversion, heaviness, and stomach problems, headache, and also forgetfulness. On the other hand, males are more likely to externalize their emotions. Therefore, they tend to express aggression to the family members or community members. Used to think a lot, and this means in Farsi churti, being nervous or irritable, also in Farsi asabani, we hear that a lot. An internal state of emotional pressure and agitation, or conversely, of very low energy and motivation. They use Khoda bozarg est. This means God is great. So, and also kare takdir est. This means this is the fortune. So they tend to approve the things they have adversity in the life. Could we please go to the next? What are basic cultural practices? I will give some of the tips from daily life, actually. Use your right hand or both hands together to gesture or offer anything. One should not touch people of the opposite gender unless they are very close family or friends. It's extremely inappropriate and disrespectful for men to inquire about an Afghan man's female family members unless you know the family or person very well. Especially, it's rude to ask an individual's mother's and sister's name. It's rude to walk away from someone while they are still walking to you. And let's look at the practice that emphasizes the importance of social support. After the death of a loved one, his or her relatives stay in his or her house together almost 3 days. And for 40 days, they gather on every Thursday evenings. So, could you please go to the next, Veronica? What are the local idioms, proverbs, and metaphors about distress, grief, and anxiety? This is also interesting. This questions answers are also interesting. I will share some idioms or proverbs from adversity definitions actually. The most pressing one is Asman baland, zemin sert. This means that ground is hard and sky is high. So they are giving this proverb while defining they are feeling trapped. And also Gosvan Targam Can Kandan Kasap Dar Gam Charbo. This means that one man's meat is another man's poison. Even though they use social support as a coping mechanisms, they can use this proverb too. So asabi means nervous, paramishi means forgetfulness, hesasat means emotions, and the last and not least, obviously we have lots of idioms and proverbs, but I wanted to choose them. Sekte-i mazi. This means that brain crisis when we translate, but they use it when they experience intense anxiety. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And I will hand over to my precious colleague, to Berna.
Thank you, Mehlika, and hi everyone. I hope you an efficient webinar, and I will continue on strategies that are used on programming for cultural adaptation. When we are starting to MHPSS implementation for Afghan population, we realized that the target group have a low mental health literacy, especially on the emotional awareness. Of course, the clinical assessments and clinical observations of the mental health professionals played a critical role on the strategies that we follow. When we realize that the target group doesn't have emotional awareness, we adapt our tools and create new modules, especially on psychoeducation for emotional awareness, and emotional regulation were established within metaphors in Afghan context. The second thing is due to the fact that association with positive imagery is one of the key techniques for bridging cultural barriers in psychotherapy with refugees. One of the guided imagery we benefit from is a peaceful garden or forest, in their words like Bakhcha, for Afghan refugees. And these are used as positive imagery for bridging the cultural barriers in psychotherapy. And the third thing is we also used problem-solving training to the program. The implementation of problem-solving targets was meant to empower beneficiaries to take independent actions within their social context to further their basic needs and to cope with their socioeconomic and psychosocial adversities Since Melika also mentioned a while before, they put their family's interest in front of their interest, actually, and then within this strategy, we trying to make them an active member in their and to take independent action within their context. And we used problems that Afghan refugees may face in Turkey, in addition to the specific worst case scenarios, according to beneficiaries' problem statements too. Also, the explanation of the intervention rationale was adapted to make it more logical, reasonable, and meaningful for the beneficiaries. When conveying information about unknown terms and psychological processes like cognition, behavior, emotion to the patients, and adapted specific components were taken into account to provide a rational and a culturally sensitive, for example, values, and culturally understandable, like easy language manner. Psychologists realize interviews with person translators, and our translators are also from Afghanistan, which are familiar with the context and the culture. And the next slide, please. And I continue with the M&E perspective, what we are doing to make sure the efficiency of the programs at the end of the program is. As MSYD Monitoring and Evaluation Department, we use some procedure in order to evaluate the impact on the outcomes of the activities. In the manner of individual mental health counseling, we are using two scales, which are one of them is for adults and another is for children, which are under age of 18. And they are SFS and STQ scales in order to evaluate the improvement of the individuals, and their results determine whether the activities has been successful. These are used as pre and post tests in order to measure the effectiveness of the program. Those scales are used before the service provided and after the process terminated in order to evaluate the impact of on the individuals. SFS is conducted with adults and measures how much individual symptoms affect their day-to-day life, and it's designed to help mental health providers understand how well the person can do everyday activities. It's a scoring system that mental health professionals use to assess how well an individual is functioning in their lives and severity of their symptoms. Also, it has 3 subscales, which are self-care, family care, and community care and engagement, which are also culturally adapted. The questions within the scales are reviewed according to the cultural adaptation research and studies that have done. For example, for self-care subscale has questions as caring for your appearance. Family care has questions as engaging in activities like having dinner with their relatives, in deep conversation with same-sex family members, with their family members. And also community care and engagement subscale has questions like participating in social events and activities like Nowruz parties and some same-sex to celebrate occasions. The statements are scored between 0, which means didn't face any difficulty, to 4, often cannot do it. And another scale, as I mentioned, is SDQ, which is used for questionnaire. It's a brief emotional and behavioral screening questionnaire for children and young people aged between 4 to 17. It consists from 5 subscales that are emotional symptoms subscale, conduct problem subscale, hyperactivity subscale, peer relationship subscale, and prosocial behavior subscale. the scale scores those subscales and show the abnormality if it exists. STQ can capture the perspective of children and young individuals and their families, and can be also filled with support of the professionals. And also this scale is adapted to culturally adapted, and statements are adapted in the cultural manner. For example, for a few statements that include are as, for example, I usually do as I am told, or we ask that question, that statement like, I do what my mother or father say to me as they are the authority in that culture, or I finished the work I am doing, my attention is good, or I fight a lot, I can make other people do what I want, or I am constantly fidgeting or squirming, or I have one or more friends, etc. And besides these scales, which are play as a role as a pre and post task to compare the improvement after the receiving the service, we also conduct satisfaction surveys after the at the end of the program, which are conducted with individuals or their families in order to obtain the individual's level of satisfaction with provided services and make sure that these MHPSS services are accessible and they are increase the well-being and safety of the individuals, and also to determine the MHPSS trends among the beneficiaries, among the population. We also conduct focus group discussions to make sure about the current problems that the population may face. We conduct the group focus group discussion with men, women, and girls and boys, also to determine or to adapt our MHPSS practice in the field. And I was very quick because of the time. I'm sorry, and thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about there, Malika and Berna. I'm looking at the chat, and I think we've got one really interesting question from Dipali, which we'll come to in the panel discussion at the end, because it raises some broad issues. Is there anything that we need to ask now? Is there anything to do with clarifying what Berna and Malika has told us? Such an interesting case study you've shared with us. Thank you. Natalie, is there anything, or I can see some questions in the chat.
Yeah, they're popping up now.
Yeah.
One of them is, can you share a bit on the timeline and process for making cultural adaptations, i.e. specific examples of how cultural mediators are used to adapt language or interventions?
Great. So Berna, you told us that the tools that you use in evaluation, they are culturally adapted, aren't they? Which is really interesting. And I hope we can talk more about that in the panel at the end. Are you able to answer this specific question about the timeline and process for making those cultural adaptations briefly?
Yeah, it takes a few months, as I mentioned that, because as you know, of course, we had that scales for different cultures since YSYD is working with different populations too. But to adapt these scales to Afghan culture or Afghan population takes a few months, and through the research, the clinical practices, which are the critical way and critical thing that allow us to adapt that scales. And also we use the translation and back translation to make sure that these scales or these tools are also adapted in the language manner too. And also we get help from the Afghan professionals as well in order to adapt that tools.
Thank you very much. It sounds a really comprehensive process, which is necessary, isn't it, if you want to have confidence in the results of that data collection.
And also the beneficiaries take an active role in that adaptation process because we learn from them more, and thanks to them too.
Perfect, thank you. So important, isn't it, to involve the people who will actually be completing these questionnaires, surveys, whatever. And I see some interesting questions here around culture, and I'd like to come back to that in the panel discussion at the end. But maybe I can just ask, there's something specific about the Afghan group population that you've been working with, saying that there are different social, cultural, political groups within the Afghan population. And how do you manage that in terms of the cultural idioms of distress and so on that you've described to us? Oh, we don't, okay.
On social, cultural, political groups with different backgrounds, we have emphasized and leaned on the baseline similarities, you know, because of course the Afghan population have the baseline and some specific similarities between ethnic minorities, and also in addition to that, we have worked with different backgrounds too, to adapt it according to the different backgrounds, different ethnic and social backgrounds. So, but in the baseline, in the structure, we have emphasized on the basic tips, you know, the basic intervention skills and basic tools according to the cultural adaptation perspective. Thank you for the question.
Yes, it's a great question, and maybe we can come back to some of those issues together at the end. One specific technical thing, I think you can answer this briefly, perhaps, Berna. So you do baseline and endline. How do you connect the two? Do you take names, or do you have some way of keeping people anonymous whilst connecting their data?
Yeah, we took them anonymous when we're collecting the data. And also for determine the baseline and end lines, we also, as I mentioned, that conduct a focus group discussion in order to determine that these variables or these trends on MHPSS.
Thank you. When you collect the baseline, it's anonymous. Are you able to match it to the same person at the end line or not?
Anonymous, but with selective, like the sticker or any thing, but without taking their demographic information.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, well, we have lots to talk about there, but I think what we'll do is go to our second case study presentation, and then at the end we'll have an opportunity to discuss these issues in more context. So thank you so much, Malika and Berna. We'll look forward to talking to you again later.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Malika. Now I would like to introduce you to our second speaker. This is Seherani Lelomela, who's a social worker in South Africa. She graduated from Wits University and joined the South Africa Red Cross Society in October 2020 as National Society Development Manager. And in December 2020, she led the introduction of the MHPSS programme to the South African Red Cross Society as the MHPSS focal person. Before joining SARCS, as its acronym is, she served in the capacity of Regional Programme Officer and Country Project Director at the Jesuit Refugee Service, where her work covered the areas of forced migration, child protection, as well as psychosocial support services. And during her spare time, Saharani is involved with mental health care programmes with local radio stations, very interesting. And she was recognised by the National Department of Health for South Africa for her contribution to a programme catering for the mental wellness of community members during the COVID-19 national lockdown. So we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us, Saharani. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca, and greetings, everyone.
You're welcome.
You're welcome, we hear you.
Okay, I'm just waiting for my presentation to start showing. The next slide, please. So mental health and psychosocial support require practitioners to have an understanding of different cultures and societal norms of different people in order to effectively render MHPSS services. More so, culture dynamics vary with a given context. This states the importance of cultural adaptability in mental health and psychosocial response. Next slide, please. So as SARCS, we disseminate information to our volunteers regarding inclusivity and cultural sensitivity in all its operations. South Africa as a country has diversified culture as a rainbow nation. This enables people who move into South Africa to internally be prepared to adopt and allow the process of deculturation of some of their original cultural norms. For example, Somali community members are educated on the effects of practicing female genital mutilation, which is not allowed into South Africa. So during our encounter with the Somali community, we realized that female genital mutilation is something that they practice back home. So as South African Red Cross, we realized that in South Africa that is not allowed, and it is something that you can go to jail for. So during our encounter with them, we go through them and we educate them about the effect of that in South Africa, and they have been advised that genital mutilation is not allowed to be practiced in South Africa, which is something that for them back home, it is allowed. So we do that so that they will adapt to what the South African is expected of them to do. Next. So we at the stages of cultural adaptation, the honeymoon phase, you know, when migrants reach South Africa, they are so happy to see how developed South Africa is. And they are excited by some of support they have from different organizations, because in South Africa, we have a consortium of organizations that are assisting migrants when they arrive into South Africa. They are assisted with accommodation for a period of 3 months. They are assisted with their education for their children to enroll at schools. They are assisted with information to go and apply for their documentation who are asylum seekers or refugees in South Africa. So for them to arrive in such phase, they feel like, oh, South Africa is good and all that. Then a shock will come when now they go to our hospitals to access services, they realize that language, it becomes a problem now. Where in South Africa, medium of instruction is English or our other 10 official languages, and they speak different languages, then they are unable to access the services, which becomes a traumatic for them, because when you go to a hospital, you are sick or your child is sick, you expect to get assistance. So now when they come back to Red Cross, explaining their difficulties, what we do, then we sit down with them, we explain to them that South Africa is a rainbow nation, we have 11 official languages. However, English is the medium everywhere you go, you speak English. So then what we do as South African Red Cross, we then encourage those who will want to learn English. We refer them to organizations that are offering English for migrants for free. We make a referral for them to go and learn English so that they will be able to integrate into the South African context and communities easily. And also another cultural shock is for those who were trafficked into South Africa. They are promised that there are jobs in South Africa, they secured jobs for them to come to South Africa. And now when they come to South Africa, when they reach South Africa, they realize that there are no decent jobs here. They were recruited to be sex workers. So when we come across such people, what we do as South African Red Cross, we then take them through the process where we sit down with them, we understand them, and we assist them to deal with the traumatic experience that they face in the hands of the human traffickers. And then we also work with other organizations to make sure that their needs are met. And we also work with police so that they will be protected and their cases be protected, because in most cases, such cases will just disappear without even knowing what happened, which put those women in great danger. Next, please. So as I mentioned that now on the recovery phase and acceptance that culture are different in Africa, then now we encourage them to learn the language so that they are able to integrate into the South African context where English is the medium. However, those who decide to settle in our rural areas, where now predominantly they speak the local languages, there are also organizations that are running language schools where they offer local languages, and then we encourage them to also apply, especially when they go to such communities. If somebody says, I'm going to settle in KwaZulu-Natal, we encourage them to learn Zulu because that's predominantly what is spoken. Even in some of the clinics, they will be speaking the local language. So we encourage them to do that so that they are able to be accepted in the community, and they also feel comfortable to communicate in the communities. Next, please. The need for cultural adaptability in MHPSS. Cultural adaptation is very important in response, as it enables mental health practitioners to have knowledge of cultural norms, language, tradition of their beneficiaries, who might easily help in the process of providing MHPSS. For example, when offering family therapy to a Somali family, men are the one who talks and women will be quiet. So then what we came up is that we will ask the woman to come alone so that we can also listen to their mental health needs and also assist them as individuals and allow them that opportunity to talk and share their mental problems, and also to talk about what is it for them to be in South Africa and what are the challenges that they face as women in South Africa, especially when they go to the hospital. Because I remember one case where a lady refused to go to the hospital to give birth because she said when she was giving birth to her first child, the nurses in the hospital, they actually called each other to say, come and see, because they realized that she was mutilated genitally, and they called everyone to say, yo, come and see that. And for her, it was embarrassment, and she felt unworthy and all that. So when she said she is not going to the hospital, I sat down with her and I said to her, you are going to go to the hospital. However, now what we need to do is to have advocacy in the hospital, to talk to the nurses and educate them about female genital mutilation and what it means to the women, and so that they will respect them, because now them not going to the hospital, it's putting their lives in danger and that of their unborn children. Next. Triggers of the process of cultural adaptation. The cultural adaptation process is triggered by the need for mental health practitioners to be able to share the client's views and to have better understanding of the client's perspective, to have a knowledge of cultural forces that may have influence on the attitude of clients, which can enable the mental health practitioners to apply effective interventions that can assist clients in need. To understand the society we serve, for example, the bereavement process of different communities. So in South Africa, the clients that we come across, especially in our different culture, a rainbow nation, we have different cultures within South Africa as a country. So when you go to a bereaved family, you are not allowed to wear trousers, not to cover your head. So we encourage our volunteers when they go to such families to practice what the community is believing in, because now the traditional leaders will feel that we undermine their tradition, we undermine what they believe as in the communities. So we also know that in our African culture, when we speak to an elder person, you are not supposed to maintain eye contact, because it's a sign of disrespect. So when we meet the elder people, especially male clients, we make sure that we don't maintain eye contact. And then we make sure that sitting arrangement also will sit in a way that they will feel comfortable, that we respect them. However, when we meet those that they will want you to make an eye contact, we do that, though it's not easy to shift, especially if you just saw a client where you don't maintain eye contact. Now you see someone who will expect you to look them in the eye to show that you are there. You understand their needs and you understand what they are going through. So yeah, it needs a mental health practitioner to really be able to understand and adopt to the client's cultural expectations. Next. Issues that could happen if cultural adaptability is not applied. The mental health services will not have an impact on the client, and it might hinder the professional relationship between the practitioner and the client. And clients might not even openly engage with the practitioner because they will feel like maybe the practitioner does not even want to understand. Sometimes the language is a barrier, or the clients feel like you don't understand their culture, you are insensitive towards their culture. So in terms of a language barrier, what we will encourage to do is that when we go to such community, we will go with somebody who's going to provide interpretation, and the interpreters are trained in South Africa. UNHCR provided such services, so we will call out the interpreters on our database to accompany us when we go to clients that they will be speaking French, Amharic, or Somali. Then they will go with us so that we respect that, and the clients will feel like we understand their needs and we understand their challenges in terms of the language. And again, when they go to hospitals, those who are still struggling with speaking the language, we encourage them to find someone who will accompany them when they go to the hospital, so that they will be able to interpret their needs correctly to the health official, so that they receive the treatment that they require. Sometimes our services are rejected by the gatekeepers. Sometimes they are traditional leaders or very important people in the community, because they will see MHPSS as a way of soliciting people's personal issues, maybe thinking that we are meddling in the issues, especially where there is family issues. When you come in as a practitioner, they might think that you are coming there to just put your nose where it doesn't belong and all that. So what we are trying to do is to make sure that people understand who we are and what we do in the communities. Next. Cultural-based coping strategies. South African people are normally consulting with traditional healers because sometimes they will take their mental challenges as something that their ancestors are communicating with them. So they will be consulting with traditional healers to seek answers from their mental health challenges. Sometimes somebody will be overwhelmed, stressed and all that. They won't take it as a stress, but they will take it as a punishment from the ancestors. Then they will consult with traditional healers. That is the way they cope with their challenges. Some they will go speak with the church leaders as a way of coping. And then migrants will prefer to speak to the pastors, the priests, religious leaders, also as a way of coping, because sometimes they will feel like the pastors, the priests, they are the ones that are actually understanding their needs and all that. And then others will go for social support through the chief council and family meetings. For an example, if a couple is facing marriage problems such as cheating or child maintenance, they will prefer consulting a family or community chief council, where now they will sit as a family, discuss the matter, then bring in somebody from outside or a mental health and psychosocial health practitioners to come and intervene. So family meetings, then they are viewed as a coping strategy for them. Next. A response within the context to the mental health issues. In South Africa, mental health is sometimes viewed as a witchcraft, and oftentimes it is assumed that one is possessed and needs ancestral intervention. Then people will go for initiation, which we call ukutwasa or hotwasa, where now they will go for that initiation process. And currently we have a controversial where the celebrity challenge her fellow celebrity members who are also traditional healers, that they went through ukutwasa, to say that the way now everyone is going for such training, people, they misunderstand anxiety. They take anxiety for a cultural calling, because now after COVID, you know, there were no gigs and all that. People, they are struggling financially. There is so much anxiety. So now they take that anxiety, interpret it as calling. So now it's a big debate. Now everyone is talking about it on Twitter and everywhere, because now everyone is asking, is it really ukutwala, or people, they just don't understand the mental health issues? So, and witchcraft, people, they are being killed because they believe to be witches when someone is sick, having mental health issues. Instead of taking the person for psychiatric evaluation, they will say these people has been bewitched. They will even know who witched the person. So yeah, sometimes those who believe to be witches are killed. And this belief of witchcraft sometimes hinder people from seeking mental health intervention, because now if a community is believing in witchcraft, it's not easy now for people to go and seek intervention for mental health. It becomes a problem. Next. There are many cultural practices that people apply in their lives. For instance, in the African culture, when a practitioner is talking to a widow or widower, the practitioner is not supposed to speak loudly, because it is viewed as a taboo and also disrespect for those who are mourning. Again, they should not be outside their place of residence after the sunset while wearing their morning clothes. So as practitioners, we know that when we receive somebody who is wearing the morning clothes, we need to prioritize them on the line so that they come before we serve them, so that when they will reach their residence before the sunset, because now if it's after the sunset, it is believed to be bringing bad luck and all that. So everyone, even in our banks and everywhere, that is a practice that we are practicing to make sure that we uphold their cultural belief. As mental health practitioners, we prioritize them when they come to our offices to ensure that their cultural practice is preserved. So we really look into that and make sure that we also adopt to their cultural practice. Next.
Saharani, could I ask you just to wrap up in the next 2 minutes? We're a little bit behind time. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm finishing.
Great.
So we have local idioms in South Africa, like in grief, in Isiswati, we will say, aluhlanga luhlangula. They are sympathizing with the grieving one. Lihu alena mohau, death doesn't favor. In distress, in Doda Aikad, we say men don't cry. Monna kingu ulela ting. A man is a sheep, he cries inside or internally. And then anxiety, lingani inga. If you keep problems to yourself, you will never find relief. Next. Perspective of adversity. In our daily lives, we face problems that they need to learn how to tackle them. Cultural adversity creates a huge challenge for mental health practitioners as culture influences how people view their problems. This could lead to cultural clashes, which might slow down the facilitation process and affects the healing process. For example, in African culture, if a person has a mental illness, they either say the person is possessed by dark spirits or is bewitched as a way of distorting from their real causes, which might delay the process of getting help. Next. Metaphor used for adversity. I'm feeling like I'm caged, I'm imprisoned, feeling heavy, and I'm blocked. Next. MNE, having meetings with traditional leaders and other stakeholders. It helps us to actually monitor the process that we are doing with the traditional leaders, and also they monitor what we are doing with the community members. Introducing satisfactory survey for clients after service rendered. Also integrating clear indicators for MHPSS in monitoring tools. Lesson learned during sessions with the clients, other stakeholders, staff, and volunteers. Next. Humanitarian programs used for cultural adaptation, community engagement and accountability, cross-cultural adaptation, cultural adaptation circle. We really use the community engagement so often because that's when the community members, they need to know who we are and who we do, especially in terms of mental health and psychosocial support services. Next, thank you.
Thank you so much, Saharani. Great. I see a few comments in the chat. I think people have really appreciated the, well, as Anna Mehta said, it's very close to the operational work in the field. So describing what you're doing, how you're working with these different cultural groups in, as you say, your Rainbow Nation. So thank you so much for that. We do have some time for a panel discussion. So I'd like to invite Malika and Berna to, open your cameras and join us. That's great. Can I ask from the chat, do we have questions that it would be good to ask our three presenters?
We have one specifically for this session that just happened.
Right.
Do you want to start with that?
Yes, maybe it might also touch on something that Malika and Berna can comment on. So yes, please.
Okay, so we have a question here. It would be interesting to hear more about how you manage the balance of cultural adaptation versus harmful cultural practices, including ethical issues around gendered perceptions.
and especially when working with lay helpers who might agree with less helpful practices? How do we work with this challenge?
So over to you, Seherani. Do you have some reflections on this?
Obviously, it's not easy, especially for a community that has been doing that back home. And now when coming to South Africa, what we really did, I had sessions, I had the group sessions with the women and actually taking them through South Africa and how things are in South Africa, taking them through the Child Act of South Africa, because now people that are going are children under the age of 13. So I will be taking them through the Child Protection Act of South Africa and also the Child Protection Policy, the global one, and educating them that this is not allowed. This is ethically unacceptable in South Africa and also globally, because now it's viewed as infringing the right of those children because they don't have a say. They don't say, yes, I want to go through this. They are going through this because of the force and force from the community, because there are women that they didn't allow their children to go through the process, and they were discommunicated from the community. They were not allowed to buy from their shops. They were not even allowed to communicate with other community members that their children went through that. So what we did, those women that now the family, even the husband, will chase them out. We have shelters that are for women and their children. We will refer them to shelters for further services, and also making sure that we equip those children with those women with skills to be independent and stand for what they believe is right, after understanding what are the challenges, because some of women that they went through the FGM, they are not having children at the moment because of what happened, or because of the effect of that. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I don't know, Malika or Bernard, do you have reflections on this same question? I guess it may also apply to the populations that you work with and the lay workers who are working directly with them.
Yeah, especially for gendered perceptions, I can say that we have also adapted our tools and interventions to according to the age and gender markers. So I wanted to emphasize on it too, because there were a question about this one earlier. So I want to add this. We have also adapted both on MHPSS and protection, actually, age and gender markers according to our interventions. So for example, same-sex gender meetings, interviews, and providing translation services for hospital or I don't know, any service provider within, again, same-sex translators or protection service providers or MHPSS service providers. I can say that.
Thank you. Anything to add, Berna?
Yeah, the same things actually. We took set all the age and gender for all the indicators or all the services in scope of MHPSS interventions as the YSID. And also, for example, we in our human capacity, human resources, we have male or female professionals, and based on the cultural context, also they can select the male or female professionals too. So for the age or for the sex, we trying to select the better option when we providing our services.
Thank you. I think we do have some other questions, but I'm going to take advantage of my position here. The focus of this webinar and the future ones, of course, is really about measurement, assessment, evaluation tools. And I'd like to ask all our presenters really, what advice would you give to anybody who wanted to make sure that the tools that they were using to do an assessment or an evaluation were appropriate, culturally appropriate for the groups that you were using them with? What advice would you give? Is anyone ready to jump in with an answer to that?
I think the research and the analysis on monthly basis is very critical. And more research, more analysis, it's needed.
What research do you think is most important in this context?
Yeah, I think in order to make sure the impact of the intervention, the trends can be followed, the intervention, if they have any impact on the individuals, community-based researches can be added. And as I say that the monitoring and evaluation activities on the monthly or quarterly or on a year base should be done. Yeah,
Thank you.
strongly recommended.
Thank you, Berna. Seherani, do you have anything from your perspective to add?
Just to add on what Berna said, what we do our monthly monitoring, and also sometimes we do weekly, especially with new arrivals. We do weekly to ensure that they are actually settling well, and what we are doing, like in terms of psychosocial support, we are actually offering the services that is needed to them. So we do weekly and monthly. It depends. If it's a new arrival or a new client or a new family that needs intervention, then we will do weekly. But if it's just ongoing, we do monthly. Thanks.
Thank you. And I've noted a comment from Gita. Do you mean research or more like monitoring? I think you were talking about monitoring there, Seherani, weren't you? But Berna, you referred to research. So could you respond to this? Did you see the question in the chat? Shall I read it? It says, do you mean research or more like monitoring? Maybe you can explain what research you think is needed. And we're thinking especially today about making them culturally sensitive tools, aren't we?
Research also can be conducted, I think, because the trends, MHPSS trends are can be changed by time, and so the needs, I think, should be yes, monitoring, but some research, especially on the specific context, I think also should be conducted, because, as I mentioned, the trends are, MHPSS trends are changed, can be changed fastly, or also the needs are changed, the post-migration situations are can be changed, and therefore the research or comprehensive research, or to compare the context, to compare the needs, or to compare the interventions also can be added. Case studies also can be taken into account. And in a short, both the monitoring and the research can be conducted on that manner.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, and Gita also says thank you. So we do have some really great questions in the chat and very little time. So I do want to try to come to maybe one more question. So Natalie, is there one that we could bring to the group?
Yes, I mean, there are two, I think they're rather short ones, perhaps.
Great.
But one is, can you explain what will be the monitoring and evaluation process for children attending group activities? For instance, structured, non-structured group sessions. And what about age-appropriate questionnaires?
Thank you. Is anybody, Seherani, Malika, Berna, ready to answer that? Do you have thoughts to share? So the question is about how to evaluate the effectiveness of children's group activities.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we have some scales to measure the well-being of the children or well-being of the adults. And so these comparable measures can be used, I think, to measure the resilience or the well-being of the children, and to compare the pre and post test.
Also, for efficiency and efficacy on this group, children, our professionals are mostly educated on child-specific field, on psychology especially.
Thank you. Saharani, do you have anything to add on that? No, maybe you don't work with children specifically. Sorry, I pulled out my headphones in my enthusiasm. Thank you. We are now short of time, and I want to give the last opportunity to Monia to close this session and to explain what will come next. So thank you so much to all our presenters, and thank you to those who asked questions in the chat. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all. There were some great questions there and issues perhaps you can discuss among yourselves later today. Thank you so much. Over to you, Monia.
Thank you, Rebecca. And from my side, also a big thank you to Malika Berna and Saharani for sharing their very rich experiences and learnings with us. Now, from the case studies from Afghanistan and South Africa, we impressively learn why it is essential to offer contextually appropriate responses to mental health needs. It became very, very clear that one size can never fit all when it comes to MHPSS. The context or culture we live in obviously affects the way we see and interpret our world. It shapes the window we look through, as Malika put it. But at the same time, we should also be aware that culture is not a fixed place. It changes when people migrate to a new context. It changes over generations and also within the lifespan of a single person. So one important point that was made in a chat and that has not been mentioned here is now that we should therefore be very careful to talk about mental health literacy when we basically just refer to Western concepts of mental health, which are obviously not representative for all regions in the world. So if we want to make sure, that was the take-home message for me that was really very impressive, is that our MHPSS services are contextually, if we want to make sure that they're contextually or culturally appropriate, we need to put our beneficiaries and their ways of coping with the world at the center of our interests and have them play a very active role when planning or implementing our services. This to really understand the specific ways mental health is framed and understood by them. So thanks to everyone participating and contributing to these webinars. Thank you so much to Rebecca for hosting us, and a big thank you also to the two interpreters in the background for helping us with translations, and also to Natalie and Veronica for the technical support you provided through the webinar. Without you, this webinar wouldn't have been possible, so thanks a lot for your support. And now I would like to take this opportunity and the last minute to invite you to our 3 other webinars of the series on assessment, monitoring and evaluation, and research. You all got the flyer. They take place always on the last Thursday of the month, so please join us through the same link you used today. And last but not least, if you would like to get involved in the MHPSS Roadmap initiative with us, we cordially invite you to become part of our working group. In case you're interested, please get in contact with Sarah or me. You find our contacts also on the flyer, or we also put them in the chat again. And you'll get an email from us with all the information package from today's webinar a little bit later on. So now I wish you a very nice rest of the day, and we hope to see you on the 23rd of February again, same place, same time. Bye, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Eileen.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you. I hope everything went well. Thank you, Abu Bakr and Mohammed as well.
Thank you so much. Nice
We
day.
will see you later. Well, not
Later.
yeah.
Yes,
just
it
with the
will
others.
be 6 here.
Mm,
So
okay.
see you later.
See you
Okay,
later.
bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Maybe Veronica, you can just help. I think
Yes.
I think we have to kind of ask people to go. No.
This is still being recorded, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
No, I stopped the recording.
Oh,
stopped
it
it?
says
It says
it's
recording.